Are you ready?
Okay. Congressman, it's now obvious, I think, to everybody that there are a lot of unanswered questions about what happened before Jonestown, what happened before Leo Ryan went down there, and how that may have contributed to the ultimate outcome of it. When your office received inquiries and letters about either problems in Jonestown or support of Jonestown, what did you do and what kind of reaction did you get from State Department authorities?
Well, we got into the case about a year ago, I think in late November of 1977, when we received a large packet of information from Timothy Stone, who was a former district attorney, had this child that was clearly sired by Reverend Jones, but was entitled to legitimacy because he was born to lawfully married people, Timothy and Grace Stone. And I first started working on it, I think, in early December, and we have a memo in the file of a year ago from a young intern saying you don't need to go further with the Stone case because Leo Ryan is going to Guyana this month. That was December of '77. Well, Leo didn't go, and we're never able to do all the things that we want to do, but in January, I wrote a very strong letter to the State Department showing that the Stones were the legitimate parents of this boy, that the boy was in Guyana. And we got a response back from the State Department several weeks later that in effect said it's just a custody matter and we don't get involved in custody matters, it's a matter for the courts. And I wrote a very strong letter saying that you're wrong because this isn't a custody between parents. The parents want the child back, and even if Reverend Jones is the natural father, he has no right to bastardize the child because the child is entitled to the presumption of legitimacy. If you're born to two people that are married, to say that somebody else is the father is to say that the child is a bastard, and our law in California properly protects the child. Well, I pointed this out to the State Department and got no response. And finally, I think it was in September, we got a note that the Stones' efforts in the Guyanese courts had failed and that we were going to have to do something. And it was at that stage that Leo said that he thought somebody ought to go down to Guyana, and he asked Normanetta and I, and this is a constant problem for members of Congress. We're always after the State Department saying protect, a man may have a gold mine in Bolivia that the Bolivian government expropriates, or you may have a business trying to do business in Chile that the Chilean government is giving problems to, and we're constantly trying to get the State Department to take the position in favor of the citizen. They're constantly sort of geared, no, our mission is to keep the Chilean or the Bolivian or the Guyanese government happy with the United States. Now, prominent politicians, George Moscone, Rosalind Carter, Harvey Milk, people who said Jones is good and what he is doing is good. And clearly Jones knew how to exercise political influence, either through the money that he obtained from the members of his church or through the exercise of turning people out for political rallies to heighten and gladden the politician's heart by showing up with 2,000 people cheering and saying, I'm for the politician.
What should the State Department's role have been in this matter, given your inquiries on behalf of the Stone boy, given the affidavits of Deborah Blakey, and the concerned relatives, I guess as we're now calling them, who were talking to you, who were talking to Leo, who were asking, to get, saying that their family members were held there against their will and that they were under some form of mind control?
Well, I don't know that with respect to adults, the State Department had any real function. After all, no governmental agency has a right to say to you or me or anybody that's over the age of consent, we think you're being held against your will, or we think you're being dominated by, whether it's Maoism or Reverend Moon or Jim Jones. You just can't intrude on adults and their freedom of choice unless those adults are willing to say, we have been coerced, or we've been unlawfully imprisoned, or we've been beaten. And we didn't get that kind of complaint from the Jones people. But in the Stone case, and I believe that it was the Stone case primarily that caused Leo Ryan to go there, it was certainly the case that caused me to consider going there. I think the State Department does have an obligation on the part of the child to represent the child against anybody, whether it's a minister or a church or someone else, when it is clear that the child is lawfully the responsibility of the married parents. And there I think the State Department's wrong. I think they're going to have to answer for it. I think that in the congressional investigation. It may have a salutary effect of hopefully upgrading the State Department's future representation of American citizens under the age of 21.
What specifically do you think the congressional investigation should concern itself with? What's very specific points?
Well, first of all, why the State Department didn't investigate the Stone case. Secondly, what the relationship was between the Guyanese government and Reverend Jones, and why the State Department didn't want to get involved in that relationship. Thirdly, they better be prepared to explain that they're taking the maximum efforts to put liens on that money so that the cost to the government, the Defense Department that's embalming the bodies, the shipment of the bodies, all of the investigation is borne by the church. And this would be true under ordinary tort claims, that if a man is responsible for 900 people dying and that the costs of all of those deaths are wrongful deaths at his cost, it ought to be borne by the church, not by the United States government, and certainly not by the bereaved relatives. I think those are the three primary avenues of inquiry. The one I'm most interested in, I think, is why the State Department didn't go to the Stone Boys' defense, and they're going to have to answer on that one.
I'd like to ask you one other question on an unrelated matter. That's something we're doing.
I don't suppose there's anything anybody could have done to anticipate what was going to happen to Leo. He might have been more aware that there was real danger there, and the guns, the place was armed, and he should have been accompanied. I mean, the comic opera cops on the runway were just ridiculous. I mean, if you compare that to the security they had at his funeral, and you couldn't move. I mean, there were more Secret Service and sheriffs and San Francisco cops and all over the place. I mean, now, because America, when they decide they want to protect somebody, can.
I guess that's still not off.
That's the lights.
Well, obviously you have a reaction on what the State Department has or has not done.
They just haven't acclimatized themselves. They're still dealing in the gunboat diplomacy of, or even the leftover hangover of Henry Kissinger. Little countries like that we would annihilate. They can't think in terms of that this is a very much smaller world, and Americans are going to be living in strange and different places, and they maybe ought to think about providing other services than just opportunities for bankers to make money.
You're saying there should have been more than just a reactionary department?
I think so. I mean, I think that that's not any one person's fault. I think that's been the State Department. That's been our experience in a whole host of countries, Chile, Iran, Mexico, where human rights are being violated. The State Department somehow doesn't want to know about it. It's like saying nobody's willing to say, hey, the emperor has no clothes. It's just out of sight, out of mind. And if you get in the habit of not noticing human rights violations, then you pretty soon don't see them at all.
Are you putting the blame on the State Department?
No, I don't think you can put the blame on any one of us. I put the blame on myself. I should have gone. I heard there were a dozen of us had the same complaints from constituents here in the Bay Area. Why didn't we go? It was pressure from other political leaders who thought Jones was a good guy. We're all as guilty, one as the next. And I think you just have to think in terms of constituent service, that not every complaint is a kook. Every complaint is somebody who hurts or is disaffected or out of step with society. Maybe we ought to find out why. So maybe the State Department ought to start to think about that too, and not just think about what's in a manual and the geopolitic and all that, but think about what citizens need and why they're there. I mean, somebody ought to think, 900 people, poor mostly, living in a commune where there's not good health care, a whole host of things, but you don't know their guns, you don't know all the crazy things that are going on, the tortures that went on. I mean, the tales that I get coming back about what went on there are just hard to hide.
Well, how would you make the State Department more accountable to its responsibilities?
I think maybe the leaders of the State Department just have to say this publicly. Hey, the State Department isn't going to be so stilted and formal. We're going to put more emphasis on human rights and telling the Americans what goes on in countries, and looking, as more and more Americans are living overseas, that becomes a large constituent. Get them to vote, for instance. Do you know that when I visit embassies around the world, when we go on junkets or investigations, I hope they won't call them junkets anymore, the members of the State Department and the staff don't vote. I say, who's your congressman? Why are you telling me? How many of you have written to your congressman? No. They live in an isolated little world, and they kind of lose track. And I think maybe just sensitizing them a little more, they're one of us. People in the State Department are also citizens.
Do you think that it'll take another Guyana incident to make the State Department realize that?
I think the State Department just hasn't thought this way. Certainly the military hasn't. They're no different. They're all isolated little communities who don't relate to the rest of society. Somehow they're different. They're special. And I think we have to forget that. Maybe just make it a little more democratic and not so, I guess, not so snobby. And just get people who have more of an interest. The Office of Human Affairs or Human Rights in the State Department is just kind of shunted aside. It's not, it's not the really prime undersecretaryship.
What is your reaction to what happened yesterday in San Francisco?
I just don't know what my reaction is. I can't believe that we haven't thought somehow to begin to understand. First of all, I can't understand how anybody at this point can make a case for anybody owning a handgun. That couldn't have happened. And why people aren't just saying, why we have to go on and on in this crazy world tolerating handguns just because a few nuts backed by DuPont and the Olin family are going to support the NRA to talk about constitutional rights that could not have happened but for a handgun. Those people couldn't have been clubbed, they couldn't have been stabbed. You'd never gotten a shotgun or a rifle in there. Now, if people don't wake up at some point and say, come on, let's be sensible, just the instrument of violence, let's start with removing that, and then secondly, let's start to think, what makes somebody flip out? Why does psychiatry have to be a white middle-class phenomena? Why can't it be something why can't we start to understand our heads a little more than, how to build bigger tail fins and fancier houses? And I hate them worse when they're like political and everybody parades around.
I know. There was a serious question among the locals as to whether or not there was meetings going on, and
I never wished more in my life that I'd been wrong when I believed Debbie Blakely, but she was entirely correct that Reverend Jones had the power to order a mass suicide in Jonestown. Now, the way I view the situation is the State Department received this information, and under the clearest principles of international law and everything else, they have a duty to protect U.S. nationals abroad. They didn't do this.
Is it possible that the State Department could have said there's 1,200 people?
there was bizarre behavior at that temple. He told me that. They thought there was some bizarre behavior, that there was crates of something going in and out of there during the night, that there was some discussion locally about beatings and brutality. And it seems like the State Department could at least gone to the point of investigating or talking with the local people up there to get their impression.
And try to be kind of succinct in your answers too, if you can. What brings you here?
Well, we're generally, Dick, Marty and I have been working on a custody case for Grace Stone, who's been trying to get her child returned from the compound in Jonestown, Guyana for about the last year. We're specifically here today to provide information to the public, to you, that the State Department has been advised of some bizarre behavior down in Jonestown for about the last 10 months, and their public response at this point seems to be that they didn't ever have any information of any bizarre behavior there. The course of our direction here is kind of twofold. One, we've had a good deal of trouble in our case working within the Guyanese court system and the Guyanese government. And secondly, we have an affidavit by Debbie Blakely, which we participated in, that sets out, to some extent, a death script for kind of what has gone on here.
You have a number of letters and replies, so on and so forth, between you and the State Department, and it sounds like you're just kind of going back and forth about something. The first thing of any real substance at all appears to be this affidavit, but you have no reply for that. Is that right?
We received no reply to the letters, including the affidavit of June 15th.
Do you know why not? Have you checked it all to find out why not?
We don't know why not.
Do you know they received the affidavit?
Well, we know that that there was a meeting with Leo Ryan and several State Department aides that discussed this affidavit, and that took place before his departure.
What do you think is happening with the State Department? Do you think they were aware of the dangers and not doing anything about it, or that they just closed their eyes to the entire situation?
Dick, I really can't answer that question. I think one of those two things is what happened, though. We certainly provided them with everything that we had. Their position claiming that they didn't have any information is totally untenable. Why they did what they did, I don't know, but the fact is that they did.
It doesn't seem reasonable that they would allow U.S. congressmen and United States journalists to go down there and lose their lives, if for no other reason than that if it can be proven that the State Department knew something about it, they come out looking kind of bad afterwards.
In my opinion, they look particularly bad.
Why do you think they do?
Well, Dick, they had information, and I don't know what specifically was told to Leo Ryan. I don't know whether he was advised of this information, but what I do know is that I've been following the reports since Saturday, and they seem to be disclaiming the fact that there was any factual basis for deciding that there was any problems in Jonestown, either concerning violence or mistreatment of human beings. They seem to be discounting that, and our communications with them has clearly indicated that there was violence potential and a deplorable condition down there. I think Congressman Ryan was to some extent inquiring into that, and whereas the State Department didn't appear to do any inquiring before he went down, and seems to be at this point not really facing the problem yet.
When you say not facing the problem yet, what do you mean by that? What should they be doing right now?
Well, Dick, I don't know what exactly what they should be doing. If the recent report, of course, is that Jim Jones is dead. If Jim Jones is alive, in my opinion, he continues to be a threat to a great number of people, not only defectors, but people who he considers his enemies, people who worked against him. Apparently there was some kind of a plan for assassination or kidnapping of high government officials. If he's still alive, I'm convinced that he'll carry or attempt to carry on this mind control type of behavior, which is going to result in a continuation of this brutality. I don't know. I don't really have an opinion as to what will happen if he's dead. I'm hoping. My experience has been with people that have come out of People's Temple, defectors so-called, is that it doesn't take them long to kind of reorient their minds to perhaps a normal kind of relationships with people, and a normal type of working within a society. But these people are, I think, most of the people that I've met in People's Temple that have come out are generous, humane, responsible people, but somehow Jim Jones has an ability to control their minds, and as long as those minds are controlled, I'm afraid there's a potential for some danger.
Well, what I'm asking here is that, to the best of our knowledge, what's happening now is that the Guyanese government is into Jonestown. They are there. They're on the scene. They're doing the investigation. The United States government is willing to go in, and as I understand, has set up an FBI office in Georgetown. But no one from the United States, government or otherwise, has gone into Jonestown since the shooting incident Saturday afternoon. Is that wrong? Do you think the United States government should go in there?
Do you have
Well, I'd say that as far as we're concerned, as far as I'm concerned, that really isn't the question. 6 months ago, nearly 6 months ago, the State Department was informed that for American citizens living abroad lives were in danger. The affidavit of Debbie Blakely clearly sets out that, and
Okay, I want to. Okay. Nah, that'll do it.
People who inquired that the U.S. representative there, the consul, went in once a month and everything looked fine to him. In the affidavit of Debbie Blakely, she clearly sets forth that these are just the most perfunctory inquiries are made, and that when the inquiry is being made, everybody knows the consul's coming out, and in fear for their lives, they act cheerful. The State Department's representative down there should have been doing a job of making more than a perfunctory inquiry. Instead, it was left to congressional inquiry into the press, and first to the press.
Admittedly, what happened there is very bizarre. The affidavit is bizarre. But as you say, what is outlined in the affidavit apparently has now come true. Is it so bizarre? Was the suggestion in the affidavit so bizarre that the State Department looked the other way and said, this can't happen?
Well, I think one thing is sure, they certainly did look the other way. I think that there was just a whole pattern, and the other documents we've shown aren't as sensational, so they're not as, to a non-lawyer, they're not as interesting. But what happened was the judicial system, which is very much like ours, the Guyanese, and had it not been for this terrible incident, I would have had the utmost respect for it, normally runs very fairly. It's a country of law. Things started to run amok. Months ago, over a year ago, a judge issued an arrest warrant for Jim Jones. This is a judicial order. Political interference by the government ensured that that warrant was never signed. Things started to run amok. It wasn't that there was similarity. Earlier, we'd given them affidavits of Grace Stone attesting to the fact.
I had heard over the weekend that the Guyanese government was very pleased with the Jonestown establishment coming in there because these people had moved back into the bush and had started to bring some civilization to an otherwise uncivilized part of the country, and that this might possibly stimulate the economy. Could this account for some undue amount of cooperation or looking the other way or something on the part of the Guyanese government? Are they capable of that?
I couldn't speculate on that. I mean, they had a good socialist tradition, and I think that they were really they were a poor country, and they were getting over colonialism, and I think they were really trying, but things really ran amok.
Well, then what's the bottom line of all of this? Are you saying that the whole thing is the fault of the State Department from the United States?
I am saying, no, I'm not saying the State Department didn't raise Jim Jones. I don't know where. They didn't create him. God created him. I don't know. I'm saying that they were advised that there was a danger and they had a duty to investigate. And they were advised in so many different ways and on so many different occasions. And between Jeff and I, we had 3 personal visits to the State Department, knocking on a lot of doors and being met with nothing but disinterest.
Dick?
That's good. I think we've got more than we can
Okay.
possibly
Okay.
do. Yeah.
I got so frustrated. I'm just trying to describe the frustration with the State Department and not responding to this thing to everything was kind of go.
Why do you think they didn't respond?
Everything got more psychotic.
there has been no one that I'm aware of that has successfully got out of Jonestown except Debbie Blakey over the past several months, which may give some indication of the conditions there in itself. The people that have gotten out have formed a committee in San Francisco that is defective previous to Jonestown. They've been demanding to be heard for over a year. When I was in Port Kaituma earlier in September of 1977, I talked to some local people there, and within an hour I had determined that there was
Department Act, why haven't they looked into it?
Dick, I can't answer that question. Maybe Marnie has some idea. I don't know the answer to that question. And I'm concerned right now that they're not taking or at least reportedly, they're not taking a particularly responsible role, in as much as they're not, they seem to be saying that we really didn't know what was going on down there. And there is, I think, substantial evidence and people available that would have given them a good deal more, and perhaps did, concerning the conditions down there.
Could the State Department have been influenced by someone not to turn the other way and just let it happen?
Of course it's possible, but why they didn't act is for them to answer, and for what us to explain to people is the information that was known to the State Department. And I think they had an enormous amount of information that any reasonable person would have been led to suspect that something was going wrong at Jonestown. Congressman Ryan apparently was only there for a short time, but in the course of his inquiries, he found 10 people who wanted to leave.
Do you think the State Department's lack of action is responsible for the deaths of Congressman Ryan and the newsmen that were with him?
There's all sorts of levels of responsibility. That's a very difficult question. I think there's certainly the focus that I can see vis-a-vis the State Department and what happened there is that they certainly were responsible for not protecting the rights of 1,000 people that were living there. They were living there in conditions that just they were being deprived of the most basic human rights, and the State Department had an obligation to look into that. Okay.
To mark, because Congressman Ryan was going to stay until the following day because there wouldn't be enough transportation for everyone to be able to leave. All at once, someone came from the back of Congressman Ryan. Congressman Ryan is a big man, and so is the other person a big man. His name is Donald Sly. I didn't remember his name at the time, but that's who he was. And he grabbed Congressman Ryan by his left hand and held him with a choke under the neck, and with his right hand he had a knife. The knife was one of these fish scabbard scraping knives, kind of a dagger-like. And he said, "Congressman Ryan, you are a mother F." And I immediately grabbed this man by the throat in the same manner that he had hold of Congressman Ryan, and I was choking him so badly that his face was blue, but he was still tense and holding on. And Mark Lane and a few of the Temple members finally rescued the knife from him, and the congressman got up from the ground, and he had blood on him. But we checked him out, and the blood was not from him, but was from the person who had the knife who had cut his hand. Congressman Ryan said that in spite of this incident, my recommendation, what I said, goes, and we gave him a pair of trousers and a shirt. He took it with him, and instead of staying over till the following morning, which would have been Sunday morning, Mr. Dwyer from the United States Embassy said he would come back later. I sat next to Jim Jones right after this, after they parted, and I said, Jim, I said, this looks like the hand of a agent provocateur. I said, with this tremendous weekend that we've had, a weekend of enlightenment, a weekend of exposure to the world, where the world could see what you have been doing, what your beautiful friends have been doing here. And I said, for someone to do something like this, can't be anything more than an agent provocateur. He said, no, I don't think so. He said, people here are so incensed and so upset. They're so angry that that's what this is a result of. Frankly, I did not see anybody upset, except that when people were leaving, they were sad. They were not angry. And for Jim to have made that kind of an evaluation was something that I couldn't quite understand at the time. There was going to be a special meeting at the pavilion. At the pavilion, people started trickling in by the hundreds. And we were invited to go to the area where the schools are, which is right next to the pavilion. And Jim Jones was there, and 3 or 4 of his friends were there. And we started discussing the afternoon. And I thought that the came and whispered something to him as he walked away to meet this person. It was Maria Caceres. With that, he said, Charles, you and Mark Lane should go to the East Guest House, because he said, I don't think it will be safe because people are so upset that they would take it out on you and Mark. I could not understand that, because as people were trickling in, they were talking to us and kidding around and saying all kinds of nice things, that they kept reassuring us that they loved it there, that they were part of this dream. Anyway, we went. Approximately 8 guns came out. I had never, at any time that I've been there, this was the 3rd occasion that I've ever been there. And on the first occasion, I spent 4 days at the Jonestown itself, and I went through every single place you could think of. The second time, I spent 4 days. I'd never seen any weapons of any kind, never saw any firearms of any kind. As a matter of fact, Jim Jones's entire background over the period of some 26-year span has been against any form of violence. He's preached against violence. He's preached in the area of being a pacifist, preached against any kind of wrong or oppression. And to see guns at this place, and to see these young men coming out with guns, and then with also walking out with what I considered to be ammunition boxes, seemed something that I did not understand, and I didn't understand the meaning of this in relationship to the meeting that was taking place at the pavilion. Pretty soon, Don Sly, the man that had attempted to stab Congressman Ryan, came down. Why he came down, I don't know. Where Mark and I were sitting in the back of the guest house. And he was sitting there, and I don't know whether he came there to guard us or what he came down there for. But he kept asking these young men who would go back and forth to the pavilion, when did they want me there? And so I said to him, I said, Don, I said, what happened to you this afternoon? Did you freak out or something? He said, Mr. Gary, in due deference to you, I don't want to discuss it. Pretty soon they came and got him, and a few minutes later, 2 young men with guns came at the ready. And fortunately, I knew both of the young men here in San Francisco. They'd been active in many of the campaigns that I've been involved in. And they had the guns, and they were smiling and laughing, and they said that we are going to die for revolutionary suicide as an expression of our protest against racism and fascism. And Mark Lane says, isn't there any alternative? Isn't there a better way of doing it than dying? And they said, there's nothing better than to die for the revolutionary suicide as an expression of protest. And then Mark very quickly said, well, if you decide to do that, Charles and I will write your story. And they said, oh. And they turned around to leave. They hugged us both. They said, well, you can take a plane. We said, we have no plane here. No place the plane can land here. Well, he said, then you can get around here and go up the hill and go into the jungle, or the bush that they call it. From the bush you can traverse yourself into the road out of Jonestown and get out and go to Port Tyumi. Against life being taken that way. Totally and completely, unalterably opposed to taking of life. It's
Mr. Gary, who, if
not, and the concerned parents are going to go with us. And he said, if you and Mark Lane want to go, there'll be 2 seats for you. So we got back into the Temple headquarters in Georgetown, and I talked to Jim Jones on the telephone, or rather on the radio, over a matter that I would consider they had now reached what I consider an exposure of victory, where I could be able to offset all of the complaints and all of the charges that had been made against them to overnight to destroy and kill themselves. I just don't understand it. I don't understand it. I can't answer.
Gary, do you think that this harm...
So the small empire the People's Temple had built here in Mendocino County appears to be collapsing. Property is being sold. And its care center, well, yesterday the state came in and moved all 14 of its patients to its facilities. The head of the center refused to make comment to us on camera, but she says that there's one thing that not the state nor anyone else could take away from her and other members of People's Temple, and that is the beliefs Jones preached. Near Ukiah, I'm Mary Savello, News Center 4. Ross, you were responsible for bringing the People's Temple to Ukiah. Why did you choose Ukiah?
Well, actually, what happened was we came to Ukiah because of an article in the Esquire magazine that appeared about October or December in there, 1961. It had 9 places to hide. That was the title of the article. And it told the places that would be safe to go in the event of a nuclear attack. Since this was a matter of concern to us in Indianapolis, and Eureka, California was one of the places, and later, on further examination, Ukiah to Eureka was the area of safety. And my personal opinion is that People's Temple cannot survive without Jim Jones. I believe that they needed his leadership, his charisma, his magnetic personality to keep together. That's my opinion. I think that this is just my feeling. Had Jim been martyred by someone, there might have been a martyr cult that would have developed, but since he took his own life, I don't really see that happening. I think they'll just fade away.
Yeah, 1965 is the first time that this office and the assessor's office really knew that any property was owned by the Reverend Jones. And this is when he bought the church property in his name. All that was there was a house and land. In '69, the church was built. But I assume they're members, and I assume the members knew all about this, these transactions, but...
Monetary amounts on that holding.
Beg your pardon?
Monetary amounts. How much was it worth?
I don't know what they actually sold them for in terms of adding the total property up.
How was it taxed?
They have market value, just like all other properties. The church itself, of course, was exempt as land and the building. As state law indicates, the Reverend Jones's house on that church property was taxed, just like all other church property.
How did you determine it was a church?
Well, most churches, and this is no exception, apply for church exemption. And we are not in the business of arguing religion one way or the other. If they say it's a church and it's their beliefs, they either have canon laws or they have a constitution, so on and so forth, and this is presented to us, and we make a determination whether or not it qualifies on those bases. It's strictly a legal basis.
If you knew then what you know now, would you still categorize them as a church?
Well, if they were in fact a church, yes, we would still categorize them as a church.
What's the criterion you use?
Well, it's in state law. It's, you know, we have a lot of church. They have to use it for the exempt purpose. In other words, there has to be an exempt purpose. Mm-hmm. And the property itself really cannot inure to the benefit, the profits therefrom cannot inure to the benefits of any individual. That is, they can make money, but it's got to go back to the church
right.
proper.
Who I believe should have been afraid for their own lives because of statements they were making. But as time went along, certain of the people whose names appeared on these lists given to us by ex-temple members appeared in certain places doing specific things, which led us to believe that the hit list was a valid list.
Nearly everyone in Jonestown is dead. Why do you believe that this is still a concern to defectors in the United States who left the temple? Who is left to be the murderers for the hit list?
Part of the people who were on the security squad were on the basketball team that are now in Georgetown, or were recently being held in Georgetown. As far as I'm concerned, at this moment, I have not seen a list published by the government which ascertains that certain people are in fact dead. One of those people, Donald Sly. I don't know that he's dead. I don't know that he isn't, but we haven't, had it documented to us.
What could they possibly gain by killing enemies of the People's Temple now?
I take you back to history. I said this last year. I say it again this year. When Hitler died and the Allies had come in and taken over, there were fanatics out there who killed people who collaborated with the enemy. And in And they did this in the name of the Fuhrer. They did this in the name of the Reich. What we're talking about, in essence, Robin, are fanatical people. And there are certain numbers. I'm not saying that everybody that's left out of the temple is a fanatic. That's far from correct. You have, I think, just as many fanatics on the other side as you do on the temple side. And I think there are some temple members who must be desperately afraid of the ex-temple members and the families of temple members who have lost their loved ones. And I'm sure the thoughts are going through their mind about who they have to look out for. But at the same time, I don't think that any public official has got a problem. I think if there's any problem, it goes to the people who started spilling the beans a couple of years ago. And vice versa. I think if there's any problem from the people and relatives of ex-members or members who died, I think the members themselves have a problem with relatives, concerned relatives, and so forth. And only a very minor amount. I don't think there's that much.
You suggest that 2 years ago, certain people in the district attorney's office knew that there was something fishy going on with Jim Jones and the People's Temple. Why was more not done?
Well, 18 months ago, as an example, our office received a tape recording which was alleged to be a conversation between Stone and a Marvin Sweeney with regard to a bribe. Because of certain things that we had heard in the district attorney's office that were going on, we did not open the tape. We invited Mr. Robert Graham, at that time, who was the district attorney and deputy DA in charge of the investigation, to come to our office. And in the presence of Tim Reiterman and I believe 2 other news people and a photographer, Mr. Graham opened the package, took out the tape recording. We then played the tape recording and made copies of it and disseminated the information both to the press and to the district attorney's office at the same time, on the basis we kind of felt better knowing it wasn't going in the garbage can. At the same time, Mr. Graham could do nothing with it because it was outside his jurisdiction, and he was forced to send it on to the Attorney General's office. And from there, it just got lost in the shuffle.
Why did things get... But there was more than that. 2 years ago, people in the district attorney's office knew that there were complaints against the People's Temple. Why was it not investigated? Jones had not left the country at that point.
I can't answer your question because I don't know why it was not investigated. I wish it had been investigated. I understand the reasoning behind some of the civil complaints not being investigated, such as the beatings and so on, because basically those were civil issues. They did not really involve the district attorney's office, and there were charges and countercharges. But as to the criminal aspects, I can only tell you that it took us 2 years to make one charge stick.
Could you have predicted what happened in Guyana?
The 914 people would die? No. I don't think anybody did. That Congressman Ryan would die? No. I couldn't predict that. I don't think anyone could have predicted it. That there would be a problem and that the problem would continue to grow, yes, we predicted that. So did everyone else who was involved.
Could any one of us have prevented it?
Yes. Yes, the State Department could have prevented it. Mark Lane could have prevented it.
Why do you feel that way about him? You think he's
Well,
information as far
I know in this state, if you know of a crime.
Yeah, that's enough for how much has Bob got? Audio. You raise the time. Yeah.
That you take this obligation freely without any mental reservation.
How are you? How are you? For that guy there, I see what's that nice house.
Namely the Board of Supervisors. It needs at least administration will have a lean. The school buses were operating.
The event into the mayor's quarters, and we both want to see, sometimes have lunch in here.
This is
Where that chip
this
is
is going to be a very I like to eat it. Goodbye.
Yeah, I really do. It's an interesting word that you eat.
Oh, I want you to leave. Yeah, yeah. Come on, Lord, and lead me.
At this time, Reverend Stephens is doing an awful special. Asking God.
Lead me, guide me along life's way. Lord, let me stand so I just want to reign. And Lord, let me walk each day with thee. And ooh, lead me, oh.
To judge the world, the earth and the sea shall give up their dead, and the corruptible bodies of the body according to the mighty working. Also, we want to thank
BBC National News last night. I also understand that both the mayor's office and the chief of police have issued official denials. I knew nothing of such an investigation. We initiated an investigation of People's Temple in July of 1977. As I understand it, the alleged investigation mentioned by NBC occurred before that. I had no knowledge of it. Obviously, if such an investigation was underway and it was quashed, that would be an improper act, and I'll be having conversations with the chief to determine that did not occur.
Are you also going to inquire whether the information allegedly received with the police intelligence was based on illegal wiretaps?
If that's an allegation, I haven't seen that one. I know that that the chief of police shares my concern that we do nothing that's illegal or even unethical in enforcing the laws. It's a very strong position that I hold, and I know he holds as well. So if such a event occurred, I'm sure it was without his knowledge or authority, and of course it could just be an allegation and not factual.
When will you have those conversations with the chief?
As soon as I can.
Is that going to be the extent of the investigation? Or simply,
No, of course not, but obviously some method of determining whether or not that is true will come out of my conversation with Chief Gain.
as soon as possible, Monday?
If for sure by Monday, if I can't reach him this weekend.
Los Angeles authorities raided, I believe, some of the People's Temple's headquarters in that city. What do you know about that situation, and what are the plans here in San Francisco?
The only thing that I know is of Bob Graham, who heads our Special Prosecutions Unit, that uncovered the information, and we transferred the information about Los Angeles to the Los Angeles District Attorney. I happen to know that Mr. Vandekamp, based on that information, pursued his own investigation. We also, during that period, received allegations that guns were being shipped from San Francisco to Guyana. No reason or evidence to conduct any search warrants of churches or homes. As you know, the remaining members at People's Temple have allowed the police department in that facility, have allowed the deputy chief of police to go wherever he wished in that facility, and so until you have, as you know, as we just went through the controversy searching press facilities, unless you have probable cause and to search a place, you can't do it, and we don't have that currently. Now, Mr. Vandekamp apparently did.
Those allegations of guns were being shipped from San Francisco for custody. How detailed were those allegations? When did they come? What did they?
If you did, does this incorporate the services of Chief Gain?
No. The investigation that I'm referring to was conducted by this office, by my Special Prosecutions Unit.
In your opinion, though, since Police Chief Gain has been put on the hot seat, how thorough do you think Chief Gain was in terms of checking out the People's Temple to see whether or not there was any terrorist activity?
Oh, I've worked with Chief Gain since I was elected district attorney 3 years ago and since he was appointed chief of police, and I happen to know that he would never, in my opinion, quash an investigation, that he insists upon lawful activities by the members of his department, and he would counsel them to dig as professionally and as legally and as vigorously to uncover evidence of crime. And it's inconceivable to me that Charlie Gain would be a part of a cover-up or a quashing of a criminal investigation. Now, I can't speak for every member of that department, but based on personal knowledge and personal professional working relationship, I don't believe Charlie Gain would do such a thing.
At the time that Timothy